I was sipping my morning coffee when the vibration of my phone broke the calm rhythm of my day. The sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, painting the hardwood floors gold, but the name flashing across my screen drained the warmth from everything around me. Mom. I hadn't heard from her in months. Not really. Just a few obligatory texts on birthdays and holidays, usually short and clipped. But this wasn't small talk. I could feel it before I even picked up. I set my mug down, adjusted the cuff of my silk blouse, and inhaled, steadying myself. Rachel. Her voice cracked through the speaker, heavy with something I couldn't quite place. Shame, maybe, or desperation. We need to talk. It's about the Vineyard. The Vineyard. The crown jewel of our family name, or at least that's how my parents always saw it. They had handed the keys to my brother, Matthew, the golden child, while I was expected to watch from the sidelines. I hadn't set foot there in years. Mom hesitated before saying the words that made my stomach tighten. Matthew, he's run it into debt. We need your help. $200,000. The request hung in the air like a bad smell. I leaned back in my chair, the city skyline glittering behind me, and let out a small, ironic laugh. They had given him everything, and now they were calling me. I can still remember the day it all crystallized for me. The moment I realized I would never be the child my parents trusted with the Vineyard, no matter how hard I tried. It was the summer I turned 21. The air was thick with the scent of ripe grapes, the kind of fragrance that clings to your clothes and lingers long after you've left the fields. I had been working side by side with the vineyard hands since I was 16, pruning vines, learning the soil, memorizing the process of fermentation. I thought, foolishly, that one day my parents would see my passion. But that afternoon, standing on the porch of the farmhouse, I overheard them. My father's voice was proud, booming in that way that always made people stop and listen. Matthew will take it over when the time comes, he said. He has the vision, the leadership. Rachel, well, she's smart, but she's better suited for something else. Something else. The words cut deeper than I expected. I stood there clutching the ledger book I'd been updating, my hands trembling so badly that the pages rattled. I wanted to storm in, to shout that I knew the Vineyard better than Matthew ever would, that I was the one who stayed up late balancing numbers, the one who ran experiments with irrigation. But the lump in my throat wouldn't let me speak. Matthew emerged from the kitchen, already basking in the glow of their confidence. He shot me a grin that said everything. You'll never be me. Later that evening, when I sat outside under the stars, trying to swallow my anger, my grandmother slipped beside me. She handed me a small silver pendant, her mother's locket, its edges worn smooth. You don't need their permission to be great, she whispered. Sometimes, the ones who overlook us are the ones who fear our light the most. Take this. Let it remind you of who you are, not who they say you are. I clutched the locket so tightly it left an imprint on my palm. And that night, I made a promise to myself. If they wouldn't give me the chance, I would carve out my own. Even if it meant walking away from everything I thought I loved. Leaving the Vineyard felt like tearing away a part of myself. For weeks, I drifted, unsure of where to place all the anger, the heartbreak, the restless energy that used to be consumed by pruning vines and balancing books. But one morning, I slipped my grandmother's locket around my neck, stared at my reflection, and whispered, if not there, then somewhere else. I moved to San Francisco with 2 suitcases, a notebook full of half-baked business ideas, and the kind of determination that comes only from being underestimated. At first, it was brutal. I rented a cramped studio where the heater rattled all night, took temp jobs to pay the bills, and spent evenings teaching myself everything I could about finance and entrepreneurship. The city didn't care about my family name, and in a strange way, that was liberating. No one compared me to Matthew. No one dismissed me as better suited for something else. I was just Rachel, a woman hungry to prove herself. My first real break came when I landed a position as an assistant at a boutique investment firm. My boss, Dana, was one of those rare women who carried authority like perfume, subtle but impossible to ignore. She saw how quickly I absorbed information, how I stayed late studying client portfolios long after everyone else had gone home. One night, as we packed up, she said, "You've got grit, Rachel. Don't waste it hiding in the shadows." Her words lit a fire in me. Under her mentorship, I learned not only how to analyze numbers, but how to read people, their fears, their ambitions, the unspoken stories behind every deal. Still, success wasn't instant. There were nights I cried over rejection emails, mornings I doubted if I'd ever escape the shadow of my family. I remember showing up to a meeting in a secondhand blazer, my shoes worn thin, praying no one noticed the scuffs. But slowly, victories began to pile up. My first independent client who trusted me with their savings, the first check that allowed me to upgrade my apartment, the first time I walked into a room and felt like I belonged. And through it all, I kept quiet about my progress when it came to my family. If they asked, I gave vague answers. "I'm keeping busy," or "work's fine." I posted nothing flashy on social media, never bragged about my promotions, never hinted at the growing accounts under my management. I learned to treasure my privacy, to let my success blossom in silence. By the time I launched my own consulting firm at 30, I had built something far greater than I imagined when I left that farmhouse porch. Clients came by referral, drawn to my reputation for honesty and precision. My office overlooked the bay, sunlight dancing off the water, and every morning when I clasped my grandmother's locket, I remembered why I started. I had carved out a life they never thought I could, and I had done it without them ever knowing. The following week, I agreed to meet them. Not at the Vineyard, not at the old farmhouse dripping with nostalgia and favoritism, but at my office in the city. If they wanted my help, they would have to step into my world. When they arrived, I could see the surprise in their faces before they even spoke. My office sat on the top floor of a glass tower overlooking the bay, every wall framed by sunlight and skyline. Inside, the space was warm but deliberate. Abstract art on the walls, shelves lined with books I'd actually read, a vase of fresh, white lilies on my desk. The air smelled faintly of cedar and citrus, a quiet kind of elegance. Matthew walked in first, his confidence faltering the moment he took in the view. He wore the Vineyard's crest on his jacket, though the thread was beginning to fray. My parents followed, their expressions carefully composed, though I caught the flicker of awe in my father's eyes. "Rachel," my mother said, smoothing her skirt as she glanced around. "This is lovely. We didn't realize you'd done so well for yourself." Of course they didn't. They'd never asked. I gestured toward the leather chairs across from my desk. "Please, sit." For a moment, silence filled the room. I let them take it in, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the quiet hum of the city below, the evidence of a life built without their blessing. Then I leaned forward, folding my hands. "You said the Vineyard is in debt," I began, my voice calm but firm. "Tell me how bad it is." Matthew shifted uncomfortably. "It's manageable. Just a rough season. With 200,000, we can get back on track." I arched a brow. 200,000 doesn't sound like a rough season. It sounds like mismanagement. His jaw tightened. My father cleared his throat. "Rachel, your brother has been under pressure. Running a vineyard isn't easy." I cut him off, my tone sharper than I intended. "Don't lecture me about what's easy. I know exactly how much work goes into it. I was there, remember? For years." The weight of my words landed. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. Matthew glanced away. Finally, I let out a breath and leaned back. "You came here expecting the same girl who left the Vineyard with nothing. You thought maybe I had a little savings, maybe enough to bail Matthew out of his mistakes." I gestured around us. But things have changed. I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. Inside were documents, proof of my firm's valuation, client contracts, assets that far exceeded anything they imagined. "I don't just have 200,000, I said quietly. "I have more than enough to buy the Vineyard outright if I wanted to." The silence that followed was deafening. My father's eyes widened, disbelief etched across his face. My mother blinked rapidly, as if trying to reconcile the daughter she'd underestimated with the woman sitting before her. Matthew's mouth opened, then closed again, his confidence stripped bare. "You," he finally muttered. "You built all this?" "Yes," I said simply. "While you were running the vineyard into debt, I was building something sustainable. Something real." They stared at me as though I'd revealed a secret identity, and in a way, I had. For years, I had hidden this part of myself. But now, watching their shock, I felt no urge to shrink. This was me. Unapologetic. Unforgettable. Unmistakably powerful. I let the silence hang in the air a little longer. They needed to feel the weight of it. The reality that the daughter they had sidelined was now the only one capable of saving them. "Here's the truth," I said, my voice steady even. "I could write you a check right now and barely feel it. But I won't, not unless things change." My father frowned. "Rachel, this isn't the time for ultimatums. This is about saving the vineyard." I leaned forward, meeting his eyes without flinching. "No, Dad. This is about accountability. You trusted Matthew without question. You handed him everything, even when he wasn't ready. And now you want me to clean up the mess? If I step in, it won't be to play savior while the same patterns repeat themselves." Matthew bristled. "I made a few bad calls, but that doesn't mean I can't turn it around." I gave him a long, cool look. "A few bad calls don't bury a business in $200,000 of debt. If I put money into the vineyard, it comes with conditions. Number 1, you step aside. Permanently." His face flushed. "You can't just push me out." "I can," I interrupted. "And I will." Condition 2, every financial decision from here forward is transparent. No more secrets, no more gambling on vanity projects. If I'm involved, I see everything. My mother shifted uncomfortably, her hands twisting in her lap. "Rachel, that sounds harsh." "Harsh?" I tilted my head. "What's harsh is being told for years that I wasn't good enough. What's harsh is watching you risk the family legacy because you couldn't face the truth about Matthew. If you want my help, these are my terms." I paused, softening slightly. "And condition 3, we start acting like a family. No more golden child, no more scapegoat. If you want me in this, you treat me as an equal. Otherwise, you can find another way out of debt." The room was still. I could see the storm of emotions flicker across their faces. Matthew's indignation, my father's pride cracking, my mother's guilt. But beneath it all was something else. Realization. They needed me. For the first time in my life, the balance of power had shifted. I wasn't the overlooked daughter begging for approval. I was the woman at the head of the table, setting the rules. "Those are my conditions," I said finally, my tone leaving no room for debate. "Take them or leave them. But understand this. I'm not here to be used. I'm here to build something that lasts, and I won't compromise who I am to do it." Matthew opened his mouth to argue again, but my father raised a hand, silencing him. His shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. "We'll consider your terms." "No," I corrected, standing to signal the meeting was over. "You'll accept them, or the vineyard will die with your pride." Weeks passed before I set foot on the vineyard again. This time, I arrived not as the overlooked daughter, but as the woman who had saved it. The air still carried that familiar sweetness of ripening grapes, but everything felt different, lighter, somehow. Matthew wasn't there. True to the agreement, he had stepped down, moving on to pursue something beyond the vineyard. My parents had begun working with a new financial team I put in place, sending me regular updates. For once, there were no secrets, no backroom decisions whispered behind closed doors. I walked the rows slowly, my heels crunching against the gravel path, fingers brushing the leaves as I passed. My mother caught up with me, slightly breathless, her eyes softer than I remembered. "You were right," she admitted quietly. "We should have listened to you a long time ago." I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Instead, I touched the locket resting against my collarbone, feeling its familiar weight. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. "You don't need their permission to be great." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the vineyard in shades of amber and rose, my father approached me. For a moment, he looked older, the lines on his face deeper, his pride tempered by humility. "Rachel," he said, voice low, "thank you for not giving up on us, even when we gave up on you." I met his gaze and nodded. "I didn't do it for you," I said softly. "I did it because I refused to let something beautiful die out of neglect, and because I wanted to prove to myself that I could." As I stood there, the vineyard stretching before me, I felt a strange sense of closure. The pain of being overlooked, the years of silence, the nights I doubted myself, they had all led me here. Not to a moment of revenge, but to one of strength. I turned toward the horizon, the locket warm against my skin, and allowed myself a small smile. I wasn't the golden child, I whispered to the vines swaying in the breeze. But I turned out to be the one who saved the gold.